everybody. Welcome into Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy as always to be joined by Dog Nation's recruiting insider, Jeff Sentell. We have had some very spirited editions of this show over the course of the last couple of weeks. It must be getting to be that kind of time of year, and I sort of get the impression that today is going to be another spirited episode. This is another one of those days where I really don't know what we're going to talk about until the show starts, and well, I'm very interested in today's content, even right off the top. Now, we're going to get to it in a minute, and I promise you, I'm not letting Jeff Sentell out of the studio until after we've had our say about Tank Bigsby and Zach Evans and everything that might or might not be going on with running backs for Georgia in the 2020 class. But Jeff actually very much surprised me off the top of the program today with something else he wanted to talk about. As I have said, kind of an unexpected five-star, not a name that I expected us to talk about today, not a guy that I really even thought of Georgia's being in the mix for. But apparently I'm not giving the Dogs enough credit on the recruiting trail. Tell us about the name that you're about to write about at DogNation.com that we're going to kick around here for a couple of minutes.
Well, first of all, I'm going to give you a little transparency. This has been a transparent behind-the-scenes week here on Dog Nation, I guess, a little bit. But Brandon and I always get before our show, and we're like, all right, what's the big piece of chicken? What's the meaty bone we can have folks talk about? And Brandon's like, oh, okay, we're going to talk about these running backs, right?
Got to. I'm
like, Brandon, that's probably not the most juicy, barbecue-laden, hickory-smoked storyline right now for Georgia football recruiting. And he's basically like, do tell, I'm all ears. And it was something, we had to think of the show first rather than an individual moment, because Connor and I had planned this. We put together the top targets this week, and what we were trying to do is to create another Before the Hedges Brandon moment.
Well, whatever it was that I said that time, whatever that was. That's actually a better impersonation of me than I was even doing a moment ago.
Wow. So we tried to do that.
That's it. Are you right kidding me off the top?
It's like Jabba the Hutt for us right now.
As I said at our Dog Nation days of summer. Are you kidding me off the top here? So it's like drunk Santa Claus. That's what it kind of sounds like.
So what we'll do, Mr. Carvel, when we get to that part of the top targets list, we will play that sound effect just so it seems like we still got BA, B, and BA. But the name to talk about, something we talked about on our Friday broadcast, I think Georgia is becoming a player for Elias Rix, the five-star corner.
You did mention this when we did Dog Nation Daily from Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa on Friday, and it seems like now you're doubling down on this even more, because the thing you told us on Friday is that Rix might take an official visit to UGA, but big programs like UGA host official visits all the time. It sounds like, though, you're about to drop some intel at DogNation.com about Georgia being in it more than just for a fun weekend, which I think is fascinating.
Well, if you guys have been getting down and dirty on the Dog Nation forum, kind of wallowing around in, I guess, the recruiting thread, well, we talked about a little bit about Elias Rix today. There's some well-informed sources that have their own opinions there about Elias Rix, and I basically just left it there about a week ago as I said, hey, wouldn't be shocked at all if Elias Rix takes an official visit to Georgia. Of course, there's a great kinship there with Kendall Milton, the five-star running back. You see on his film, makes a ton of plays, and I know we say Wayne's World a lot here because a lot of dog fans sit there and start to go crazy. Think about this for a second. If some miracle, I don't know if I'd call it a miracle, but if some fashion Georgia was able to end up with Elias Rix in the signing class, when all of a sudden all those mock-ups and mock classes that go from 6 or 7 5-stars might elevate by one more, but big picture there would be Keely Ringo, potentially nation's number 1 corner, Elias Rix, potentially nation's number 2 corner, and also Justin Kimber, who's the Jalen Kimber, who's the number 5 cornerback in the country for 2020. And let's be careful there. Let's put a disclaimer, a Dog Nation Daily warning at the bottom of this script, not to count the 5 stars before they're flipped or even signed or even committed. But those are possibilities now for this Georgia recruiting staff.
So a couple things here. Dane Cole in our Facebook comment section says if that were to happen and Rix were to come to UGA, he could have a ready-made, really cool nickname for defensive back instead of Pick Six. He says, how about Pick Rix? I don't mind that. Maybe a Pick Six Rix or something along those lines. I think that Dane could be onto something. And Ken Feinberg in our Facebook comment section touching on something that you had said a moment ago, that if this were to happen, or even if there are ruminations that this could happen, you do have to put a lot of this at the feet of Kendall Milton for a moment.
Yeah, he's really recruiting hard for Georgia. I mean, he is a dedicated recruiter. I wrote earlier this week that I thought that Kendall Milton and Mikhail Sherman were basically the alpha and the omega of Georgia's recruiting class this year. Maybe even a couple of Nolan Smiths from 2019. And those two boys have played together for a long time. It goes all the way back to 6th grade, Brandon, and there's quite a relationship there.
So I want to let you hear something from Rix about Kendall Milton that goes in more depth about the relationship. This is prior to Milton committing to Georgia, but you asked him about the feeling that Rix might like to play with Kendall Milton and what that would be like. And Rix makes it pretty clear that there's a friendship bond here, but there's also ultimately doing what's right for you. And he was saying this about Kendall Milton. Presumably he might feel the same way about himself. Here is what Rix once said to you about his relationship with Kendall Milton and where they might play their college ball. Here is Elias Rix, the 5-star defensive back.
It's your dream over our dream. You know, like, you still got to do, like, I don't want you at my school just because if you don't like it, even if it's not what's best for you, don't do it. Like, that's cool. I mean, I want him there bad, but I don't want him there that bad to where it's like, you know, I want what's best for Kendall.
So he says, you know, ultimately you've got to do what's right for you more so than doing what's right for the collective we here, the pair of friends. And I guess ultimately that's why I've always been skeptical that Georgia could get in with a guy like this. I mean, I've seen things that his family has said about their love for what they call DBU. I mean, obviously LSU's had a great success recruiting the defensive backs. And so while I appreciate the friendship that's in place here between Milton and Rix, I do admit that for me there's at least a little bit of skepticism that friendship would trump what has been, at least from my vantage point, several hundred miles away, a successful recruitment of Rix by LSU.
Yeah, I think he committed last year on Christmas Day, which always brings some sort of sentimentality to it. Georgia's had some Christmas Day commitments, but Elias Rix was the nation's #1 corner for a time before he was overtaken there by one Mr. Keely Ringo. So I think when you're talking about defensive back traditions, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, you start throwing in Tyreek Stevenson, you throw in Tyson Campbell, potentially what Georgia could do with the 2020 class with guys like Kimber and Ringo. And then I just think Georgia's building something. And we were discussing it on the forum. I basically said, if you're trying to build a super team, and then you have that statement that Kendall Milton said is we're trying to be in the top 2, and I'm not talking number 2.
Yeah.
Well, for Georgia to dust Alabama and Clemson and keep arching and these sort of things, folks, I mean, all those tweets that everybody saw this week that this fella right here got so excited about.
Yeah.
If Georgia does what the kind of the tea leaves or the online chatter is kind of thinking or projecting or probing or trending that they will do, I don't think Georgia is no longer in the mix for the nation's #1 class in 2020. But there's that 325 threshold on the 24/7 Sports composite ratings, which would push Georgia past Florida, I believe, for the all-time greatest class in NCAA in these recruiting rankings history.
Boy, that's a fun thing to think about. Let me let you hear one more piece of audio. Once again, Rix talking about Kendall Milton. What if they don't end up playing on the same team? What if Rix stays at LSU and now we know that Kendall Milton's going to be at Georgia? And what if that's the way this all ends and is cemented? Well, Rix makes no bones about the fact the way that he would view a potential showdown with Milton were that to be the case. Here's more from the 5-star defensive back.
I'm trying to take his head off. Yeah, I mean, that's my boy, but that's that competitive. He gonna try to take my head off. I'm gonna try to take his head off. Like, simple. So it's like, that's my brother, but on the field, we turn the enemies.
So he says, that's my brother, but on the field, I'm going to try to take his head off. So clearly there's no lacking of competitive fire here, even though these friends have at least contemplated what it might be like to be a part of the same roster.
Yeah, there's another, when I had that conversation with Mr. Rix at the opening in Texas, he even told me about a story when they're 12 years old, Brandon. And what's happening is Elias saw Kendall, even back then, jump over 2 guys. When 2 guys were trying to tackle him, he basically did the no Sean Marino or just hit the Super Mario Brothers for our older audience, and he just jumped over 2 defenders. And this was at a 6th grade as a 12th grader. And Elias Rix had never seen anything like that before. And I even said, well, how big was Kendall going there? About 150? And he said, no, Kendall was already about 170, 180 in the 6th grade.
Kathy Aquavia Green on the subject of Elias Rix says, wow, I haven't heard that one. That was and is for me a surprise as well. Not a name I expected us to be talking a ton about today on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. So let's let Jeff put his money where his mouth is, and let's transition our conversation to top targets here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger and see if Rix shows up as one of our top targets here today. In fact, we'll start where we have in the past here with name number 1 on our top targets list of the class of 2020. It has been a defensive back for a while, a defensive back again in Kelee Ringo from Scottsdale, Arizona. A lot of social media chatter connecting him to Georgia as of late. We have a lot of trolls in our YouTube comment section, Jeff. One of those is a guy named D. Barrett, who's a Texas fan, and he was suggesting that Georgia's potential connection with Elias Rix could harm its relationship with Kelee Ringo. Do you see that as a possibility?
You know what? This is what, Brandon, I think probably went through your mind. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the thought of Ringo, Rix, and Kimber dancing through your head.
And by the way, Kimber performed great at the opening. He really made a name for himself.
Yeah, these are 3 guys, and I can't imagine any board in the country that would not continue to include Mr. Jalen Kimber. But it would be, what is it, the counterpunch, the antidote, the elixir, the counter agent to whatever. I mean, think about Alabama when they trotted out Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy.
You got to have those defensive backs to match up against guys.
What about
like
Clemson with the guys that they've piled up, T. Higgins and all that? Well, if a future Georgia defensive backfield included guys like Lewis Seen, Tyreek Stevenson, Tyson Campbell, Kelee Ringo, Jalen Kimber, and even Elias Rix, that'd be one of those things that says, we'll just put the football up in the air and let's play, because Georgia would have the players to match anybody else's wide receiver core.
I'm going to try not to go 30 minutes with the top targets this week. We've been doing that seemingly for the last few weeks. Let's see name number 2 in our list, just below Kelee Ringo there. How about Noah Sewell now climbing up to number 2 on this list? The linebacker out of Utah. Obviously, we know what kind of player he is. It's a difficult recruitment given Sewell's ties to programs west of the Mississippi, including Oregon. Anything new you want to add on this one for us, Jeff?
Fantastic player. I think Georgia's very much in that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of those crystal ball traffic cops pointing out that Georgia would eventually be trending with Sewell. He's going to take his official visit for Notre Dame game, and in the interest of like what you said, I don't want the Vegas odds makers to put our top targets this week at going 30 or 40 minutes like it has been approaching in years past. So that will cover Mr. Sewell. So
I will just say this by way of opinion. I have grown to love Noah Sewell as a player. My opinion, though, is I wouldn't have him at number 2. But I've grown to love him as a player. That's not a knock on him as a player. Obviously, if most of these guys, Georgia fans for the most part, want relatively equally. But if you're forcing me to rank, I probably wouldn't have Sewell at number 2, but I understand why you have him at that point on your list.
Simply put, Georgia doesn't have anybody like him in the program right now. I don't think anybody in the SEC has anybody like him in their programs right now. It's a rare player. I don't think I've ever covered or scouted or seen a player quite like Noah Sewell. He could take somebody's job immediately. He has that type of short space quickness. But if he's not 2 for you, how far down this list is he for you?
Not very far. Not very far. I'm just saying there are a couple names that I might put ahead, but he's not all that far down the list either. In fact, let's see who is next on the list after Sewell. Our top targets for the class of 2020. Birch would be one of the guys that I would covet for Georgia as much, if not more than anybody else. To know that he's number 3 on this list right now, I think ought to make Georgia fans feel pretty good. There's obviously a little bit of a visit situation there coming from a couple of weeks ago, and I'm hoping there'll even be more good news on this coming Georgia's way. What can you tell us about Birch?
I think the Birch update we have to have for this week is the 6'4", 6'5", 250 pound and up strong side defensive end type, that edge player. I think Georgia just is losing one of those off the roster.
The absence of Brenton Cox makes this, I would say, even more interesting.
Because Brenton Cox was probably the closest facsimile, an All-American 5-star top 20 player to one Jordan Birch. So now his departure, and you look at a guy like Malik Herring, obviously doesn't have more than 1 or 2 years left in the program as well. I think it becomes a very tidy fit for Georgia and Jordan Birch.
Let's see the next name on our list. Top targets of the class of 2020. And Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. We've seen 3 defensive names thus far, and now we get to 5-star running back Zachary Evans. And Jeff, there was so much chatter over the course of the last couple of days because of the fact that Tank Bigsby announced that he's going to make his commitment announcement on Friday. Concurrent to that, if not connected to that, You had 5-star running back Kendall Milton on Twitter saying, I think we can show this to you, y'all going to thank me later, essentially suggesting that his recruiting work was about to pay off to the tune of a UGA commitment at some point in time. Yeah, you see Kendall Milton on that. We know that Milton and Evans have a relationship. We've heard Milton talk to you about Zachary Evans a couple of times in a couple of different interviews. To add to that, the intrigue of the fact that Chad Lindbergh, who's a fellow Texan with Zachary Evans, was also cryptically on Twitter saying y'all aren't ready. Seemingly a reference to a recruiting win as well. You had Tate Ratledge giving you the Go Dogs, which is a similar thing to what Kirby Smart would tweet out if Georgia was going to get some good news on the recruiting trail. And, you know, I said this on Dog Nation Daily today. I talked to you about this yesterday when you were on the program. A lot of Georgia fans are going to, if not outright assume, they're going to question whether all those statements on Twitter were in reference to Zachary Evans, and they're going to take it a step further and say, is that why Tank Bigsby's about to go ahead and commit? Almost certainly not to Georgia. You didn't exactly shoot down the possibility of that, and we spoke about that on Tuesday, and yet the rumors are going to persist about what Milton and company may have been referencing there.
Well, what if they were talking about multiple gentlemen? What if they were talking about multiple targets? And I got one for you.
That's not what the 51% majority of our audience probably thinks, though.
Well,
at least in the case of Lindbergh and Evans.
Let's go through a few scenarios, Brandon. If I was to tell you which one of these scenarios would make you most gleeful, they were talking about Zachary Evans.
That'd be great news.
They were talking about Darnell Washington.
That'd be great news.
They were talking about Noah Sewell.
That'd be great news.
They were talking about Jordan Birch.
That'd be great news.
They were talking about, did we mention Darnell Washington yet?
No, and you could also probably add Cedric Von Pron in that, especially since it's two offensive linemen.
What if they were talking about Elias Rix?
That'd be very interesting too. The Lindbergh-Ratledge connection to Rick seems, I guess, less logical, but that's certainly interesting. I mean, listen, I said this on our video portion of Dog Nation Daily today. The problem for me on Evans, and after this we're going to move on and talk about a different name. The problem for me is on Evans, and I'm saying this speaking strictly as a fan, not as an analyst here, there's not anything anyone could tell me about Evans right now, including him calling us up on the phone right now and committing live on our airwaves. There's not anything anyone could say, Evans included, that would make me feel this recruitment is over.
Oh, it's definitely not over, but I'm just going to, like the tea leaves that I've been exposed to, I think I knew he was coming about a week before even we...
you mean visiting Athens 2 weeks ago? You got to be very careful.
Yeah. Let me finish the timeline. I knew he was coming for the cookout at least a week prior to his showing up. We put it out on Hedges the following week. He made the visit. The visit went well by all accounts. And then going forward, he likes Georgia for a lot of reasons. He likes to be able to share carries with a guy like Milton. He likes the big offensive line. It perfectly fits his running style. It's a place for running backs to go and get to the league. And there's a potential super team brewing up in Athens. I think Georgia checks a lot of the boxes, but I'm with you. The final exam, until the final Scantron form has been graded, or whatever kids get tested on these days, I think that one will be very much a contested recruitment and an interesting recruitment for a long time.
And Mark Godfrey on Facebook says, Jeff, you got to calm BA's nerves. In this particular instance, I'm not nervous and I'm not anxious. I'm just telling you that I view Evans' recruitment as very different than a lot of guys. Kendall Milton, I don't think he's going to look at another school. MJ Sherman won't look at another school. There are uncommitted players right now that I am virtually 100% sure are coming to Georgia. Zachary Evans, even if he were to commit, I wouldn't be 100% sure on. That's not a knock on Evans. That's not a anxious statement about the state of the 2020 class. Just certain players are different. Certain recruitments are different. And I think the Evans one, even, if the fact pattern changes, is still going to be more up for grabs than some of the other ones that are out there. But it's going to be a fun one to watch.
So if you've got a case of those Kroger $6.99 wild snow crab clusters on the line here.
Speaking of which, let me tell you about those just real quick. If you would like to get those as well, you can get them right now. $6.99 with card. It's the wild snow crab clusters, but you got to act between now and August the 13th. So that's going to go away real soon. So take advantage of those wild snow crab cluster sale at Kroger when you use your Kroger card, and sign up for that if you haven't done that by all means. $6.99 with card. Act now before August 13th.
So let's
go ahead.
Let's say we're throwing you 1,000 show party with 1,000 cases of snow crab clusters, Brand. 1,000 clusters of those 699 snow crab clusters. If you had to place a gentleman's wager on who's the most likely contender or challenger to Georgia in the end for Zachary Evans, where are you putting your snow crab clusters at?
A&M by every chip I've got, I'd put on the A&M side of this thing.
A&M more than Alabama, more than Texas, of
Man,
course.
I don't care what he tweeted about. I know that there's been a lot of chatter. I guess in the last day he's tweeted about something about Oklahoma and something about Alabama. That doesn't mean a thing to me. That doesn't mean a thing to me.
Georgia, Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So then you start thinking offensive lines. You think about scope of the program. I don't know. Zachary Evans might be the type of kid that may be 50-50 on his decision or 51-49, and maybe he'll just let the Georgia, Texas A&M game in November decide it.
Now, you're talking about fun. That'd be fun.
And Zachary
trial
Evans
by combat is all you Game of Thrones fans like to talk about.
And Zachary,
trial by combat for Zachary Evans recruitment.
Zachary Evans is in the house for that game on his official visit, and it's Georgia, Texas A&M, and those are the two schools that would be lurking late.
I got to tell you, that'd be good TV right there. Let's see the next name on our list. This Evans thing is not going away anytime soon. Wow.
Cue the music.
Here is Jeff Sentell. Oh, wow. I mean, are you kidding me off the top here? That is not an overreaction to this, because here's a guy that has not been on any of our lists on the also receiving votes, on the top 10 or anything, and he bullets all the way up to number 5. In fact, he's the only guy with an arrow next to his name right now. That is that's amazing to me, Jeff. This is not what I expected. I am blown away by it. I'm just completely blown away by this.
I just think there's something there.
Obviously you do. It's a fun thing to talk about. For those of you who are just joining us, we address more of the Rix thing off the top of the program. Many of our listeners have already drawn the connection between his friendship with Kendall Milton. I'm guessing you've got some written stuff on this coming up here at dognation.com really soon too?
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to write about, and this is one of those things with Rix. This is very, I guess I would say, very early of things right now. He is still currently committed to LSU. I think that's the main thing to think about. All we're doing right now is we're identifying Georgia as a player in his recruitment going forward. Number 5, it's a 5-star cornerback, the number 2 cornerback in the country, a very, very elite talent in his class. You watch his film, you could be blind and you could pick out the highlights, chock full of those things as well. So Elias Rix, I guess if I was Casey Kasem, I would say a chart buster or a chart topper.
We won't stop till we get to the top.
Introducing himself into our countdown at number 5. That's because Elias Rix can really play, y'all.
So I said before, we have a lot of trolls from various fan bases that check out seemingly every show that I do. We don't typically have a lot of LSU trolls. Something tells me that's about to change. Something tells me some LSU folks are about to get very upset, and they're about to start letting Jeff Sentell know all about that. But we'll watch it and see where it goes. That's a bold statement from Jeff Sentell. That'll be very interesting to check out. Let's see who Mr. Rix supplants. Moving on to name number 6 in our top targets of the class of 2020. Going down a little bit this week, but certainly not falling in the minds of Georgia fans, is the 5-star, we'll call him an athlete officially, but tying in the minds of Georgia fans, it's Darnell Washington. You mentioned Washington earlier. What do you think things stand with he and the Dogs at the moment?
Great unofficial visit. Still likely to see him for his official visit. For the Notre Dame game, man, that stands are going to be packed that weekend. I think that is a candidate for the biggest recruiting weekend in Georgia history. I'll have to count up all the constellation of stars there. Still got to beat a lot of those 2017, 2018 games with guys like 2017 games with guys like Nolan Smith, Owen Pappoe, Justin Fields, and guys like that. Trayvon Walker, Jaden Hazelwood, Dominic Blaylock, lots of them.
I mentioned LSU trolls. Chris Branham, who's not an LSU troll, gave us his he tried to type an impersonation of what looked to be Ed Orgeron there. That's pretty funny, Chris. That's a pretty good try there on that. You at least got a laugh out of me. Next name after Darnell Washington on the list. Are we going another tight end here behind Darnell Washington? Let's find out as a part of our top targets. Now we're going to stay offensive line with Cedric Von Prawn from out of New Orleans. That's also a guy that, well, I guess a lot of Georgia fans are curious where things stand with him, coming off another one of these visits for the cookout a couple of weeks ago, and a guy that I guess is kind of in the center of attention here just a little bit based on, will it be a shorter timeline? Will it be a longer timeline? I think that speaks to ultimately where Van Prawn lands and ends up.
Yeah, I think Von Prawn will basically, Sam Pittman's the type of recruiter that likes to have his homework and all his hay in the barn prior to the season. Von Prawn has long since wanted to do his for the Under Armour All-American game. He also now has an invitation to go to the All-American Bowl. That's kind of the former Army game, now kind of affiliated with Adidas a lot. That's still the game in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome. Interesting. This will be an interesting month for Cedric Von Prawn because there's a lot of reports out there that have Von Prawn making his decision in August and before the first game of his senior year because he really wants to get that out of the way and focus on the state championship run for Warren Easton High in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we'll see where that all plays out. I do think that Van Prawn's a very important name for Georgia, given that opportunity to get another one of these elite interior offensive linemen. That's certainly the way that I think of when I think of Cedric Von Prawn. So we'll follow that story. How about next name, top targets, class of 2020 here? We go tight end. Not Arik Gilbert, though. It's Theo Johnson out of Canada. Any new update on Theo?
I put in the Dog Nation forum that I think Theo Johnson is probably definitely feeling love right now.
I saw you put that in the forum. By the way, hurry up intel at forum.dognation.com. These are bite-sized recruiting nuggets from Jeff Sintel. Hard not to read 1,000 things into that. Well, hard not to read a lot into that.
Well, did you see the quote we got from Mikhail Sherman this week that who he was talking to and who he was working on? He mentioned Keely Ringo, he mentioned Darnell Washington, he mentioned Theo Johnson.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And listen, I've told y'all before, there are a couple of these recruits for Georgia who are kind of bellwethers. Tate Ratledge, the names he's mentioned, Georgia went out and got those guys. MJ Sherman, the names he's mentioned, Georgia went out and got those guys. That's really telling, Jeff, really telling.
And again, anybody that wants to look at this board and see the down arrows next to super players like Theo Johnson and Cedric Von Prawn and Darnell Washington, got to realize this is a class that is coming for that number one spot.
Mike Anderson says, man, Gilbert's sliding down bad. Chris Branham says instead of a Rick Gilbert, it's a Rick Gonbert, that he may be heading elsewhere. Y'all, I've changed my tune on this. I've said my piece. If Georgia were to get Darnell Washington and Theo Johnson, you'll never hear me say a cross word about why Georgia didn't get a Rick Gilbert. Theo's a very impressive player. Darnell Washington's a very impressive player. I can't tell you for sure either one of them are going to pan out in the college level because none of us really know that for sure. I certainly won't pretend to. But if you bat 670 on those top three freakish athletic tight ends, you won't hear me say a word about why he didn't do better in state with a Rick Gilbert. You won't hear me say a word about it.
Moving right along, I think you covered the point well, Counselor.
Next name on the list after now we get to a Rick Gilbert out of Marietta, Georgia. And is this a Tennessee thing? The first official visit was taken to Alabama. That's, I think, reportedly where he also spent part of that weekend when he was at Clemson, not at Georgia for like the 9 millionth time of not being at Georgia. I mean,
he's been at Georgia 9 million times as well.
Yeah, but that's like 2 years ago. I mean, there are a lot of high-profile absences for Gilbert when it comes to visiting in Athens. I mean, you at least agree with that.
He's looking around, sir. Maybe he's seen everything he needs to know at Georgia, looking around. Again, the thing to know about Arik Gilbert is he has said the last time he kind of shared a timeline was he wanted to get it done in September. He needed to watch 3 or 4 games of everybody, not just Georgia, particularly that telling Notre Dame game. And that he would probably be ready at his jersey ceremony for the All-American Bowl to make up his mind and share his decision with the world. And, you know, I guess another sign, you talk about whether he's going to be in the house or he's not in the house. If he's not at Sanford Stadium for that Notre Dame game, that will also be very telling. But I do expect him to make that one.
Yeah, so certainly could
biggest
be.
Game in college football that week.
Yeah, could be huge there. And you know, it was kind of funny. 2 weeks ago, Georgia didn't want to have the multiple running backs on campus together. But it sounds like for that weekend, they're okay with having multiple tight ends together. I guess.
You know, they got formations where you can get 2 or 3 tight ends on the field.
That is true. You could do that. Next name after the flurry of tight ends. We get to, wow, now this is fun. How about Florida commit Gervon Dexter? The first time, and I believe before the Hedges presented by Kroger history, the first time a committed player has ever cracked the top 10. I'm pretty sure that's the case.
No, look on the first screen. You have Elias Rix
committed.
Oh,
that's right, yeah. Actually, you got to add Rix, the LSU committed on this. It's very rare for committed players to make the top 10, but Dexter does. Is this based on Brent Cox, or is this independent of that?
I just think Dexter is a guy Georgia needs to have in its class to have the best possible defensive line, defensive end class this year. We've said this. We're going to say this. This is going to be a company line. It's going to be the boilerplate statement with Gervon Dexter.
So
here's what's going to happen. Florida needs to have a 8 or 9 win season, not a 10, 11 win season. Georgia needs to do what everybody that probably watches this program a lot expects Georgia to do. And I think the stark differences between those two programs will lead Dexter to believe that he might have to make a business decision for his future.
So very quickly, I don't have an opinion on this. I'm curious about yours. Obviously, Jordan Burch is the top name for me and many fans when it comes to that defensive line, defensive end type position. What does the gap look like? Now, you would say, well, it's 7 names on our top targets list, but what does the gap look like in terms of, as a player, Burch and then the fall off to Dexter? Or I'll add Zykevius Walker, who's probably a little bit different kind of player, but also a defensive line name. I mean, how different are these players? How much of the average fan want the one over the other, and how much of a consolation would the one be compared to the other?
I think first of all, Burch is probably the higher rated player, and that's what the 24/7 Sports rankings and composites all say. But I think Burch is the more athletic outside edge player, where I think Dexter, although he can do both, I think Dexter is more of that guy that can play inside, play the 3 technique. Just the thought of Jalen Carter and Mr. Dexter eventually in a front for Georgia, throw in a rotation that involves Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis. I just don't think it gets much better than that.
Yeah, it doesn't. And if Georgia were to somehow flip Dexter here, you got James Williams, the 2021 Florida safety, who, I mean, I think there could be something really fun potentially going on there between he and Georgia. Poor Dan Mullen. What's he going to have? What's he going to have left?
Poor Willie Taggart. Poor Manny Diaz.
Yeah, I'm not the least bit worried about them.
No, you're just focusing on the team in Gainesville.
I mean, you want to talk about fun stuff. That would be it. That would be it. All right, let's see some of the guys that almost cracked the top 10 but didn't. I mentioned this name on Dog Nation Daily this week because of what you had him on last week. Jaquarius Conley, the safety from Texas that just committed to Auburn. Why am I blanking on his name?
Chris Thompson.
Yeah, Chris
Jr.
Thompson. So he's now off the board. At one point in time, you had kind of talked about him. Interesting to see if Georgia looks at him. Obviously, Avante Williams is still there. How about the big surprise here, though, at least in terms of not a name we've had on the list before, and that's Nadab Joseph, a one-time Georgia signee for the class of 2018, had been in junior college. This is the reason why I'm presuming his name pops back up here, is that Joseph has now got an official offer from UGA. Now, Jeff, you can do the timeline better than I can, but I'll just tell people this way. Joseph has gotten a flurry of offers from a bunch of programs, so much so that I've asked you about him a couple times on Dog Nation Daily about is Georgia still recruiting Joseph coming out of junior college, just given the fact that there was a lot of chatter involving him and other programs. This, and your inclusion of him into our top targets, also receiving votes list, leads you to believe that Joseph and Georgia may be kind of connected together once again here. Would you mind talking about that?
Yeah, let's pull that one up again, because I know Brandon sometimes wants to know, okay, you got all these honorable mentions here a little bit, and he sometimes wants to know, well, who would have been 11? Who would have been 12? I think Smith would have been 11. I think Joseph would have been 12.
Okay.
I think Joseph
12 for Joseph is big.
I think he's ahead of Williams. I think he's ahead of Conley. I think he's ahead of McLaughlin. This is just what's going to be very interesting with Georgia. The best case scenario, the rosiest scenario would be something great happens for the Georgia faithful with Dexter. Burch, Georgia convinces him to come play and leave the state of South Carolina. And then you got Rix. Whatever could potentially, the maximum potential that what could happen for Dog Nation, they're going to have to make some hard choices. Do you need 4 receivers? Do you want to stick at the 3 receivers? Do you need 2 running backs? Do you need 2 tight ends? Do you need 3 defensive backs? I mean, with Joseph, and this is the point I'll make, Joseph would make 4 defensive backs, but he's already signed.
Yeah, that's the most valuable aspect for me.
Yeah, and that's the other, I guess, selling point, or the other really cool thing. And I'm going to confuse people. We're going to get lost in the weeds. But Georgia's already signed him in the 2018 class. That means he will count towards the 85 scholarship limit, but he won't count towards the 25.
Yeah.
And also, Brandon, I don't know if you've picked this up on the forum, but there's a lot of chatter going on around that to kind of work and interact with the forum, that maybe that cap of 25 signees per year you might get one back for every one you lose for the portal, because otherwise schools are going to have a hard time losing players like this when they go to portal. And some smaller schools will have a hard time getting to their 85 because they won't have the transfers coming back in to meet the ones that might be leaving.
But you're talking about a proposed rules,
definitely proposals right now. That stuff won't happen until the Board of Governors.
But it is a actual fact that if Georgia were to add Joseph, that doesn't subtract a name from what they can sign for the class of 2020. You're essentially taking, if it was 23, now it's 24. If it was 24, now it's 25. Whatever the actual number that Georgia has to work with, Joseph simply adds a name to that list without having to take anybody else off. It still counts against your 85, so you got to figure out, how many defensive backs is too many defensive backs. But in terms of recruiting for 2020, it's just a free name to add to the list. Yeah, and he's already good enough to play.
It's kind of like a free space for bingo. I'm not a big fan of trading for junior college players a lot because you only get 2 years of development, maybe 1 year of development. And Georgia's already going to do that with DJ Daniel as well, the talented gentleman out of Georgia Military College by the way of Griffin. But with Joseph, you have a guy that, remember his story, he was going to go to Alabama, then Alabama kind of, he was having trouble qualifying, which was evidenced by the fact that he didn't qualify when he signed his letter of intent with Georgia. Has to spend, I think, 24 months, 18 months in a junior college program in Independence. Now getting the official offers back from Georgia. He's kind of like a free space on the bingo board. So Joseph, I think, is very interesting because I think what's happening there is his timeline, or maybe other timelines like the Avante Williams timeline and Chris Thompson chooses Auburn. I think a lot of those things are kind of working in his favor. Georgia losing another guy off the 85 and a guy like Brenton Cox, where I think Nadab Joseph is still a very good defensive back and an interchangeable defensive back now in the 2020 class.
Yeah, he's a good player, but his numbers situation makes him even more valuable than that. It's Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. That's Dog Nation recruiting insider Jeff Sintel. My name's Brandon Adams. By the way, let me tell you about the Kroger Fuel VIP program. This is a great deal. It allows customers to earn 2 fuel points for every $1 spent. Enrollment's easy. You can use the barcode at checkout, or you can enroll online at Kroger.com/FuelVIP. The website, once again, Kroger.com/FuelVIP. The annual enrollment's just $40, and it's a great deal because you get 2 fuel points for every $1 spent. All right, we're going to have another look at 5-star running back and UGA commit Kendall Milton a bit later on in our program. We'll find out what some of his high school teammates have had to say about him. But let's dig a little deeper into a different UGA commit here for a moment. How about Joshua Braun? Another one of those great wins for Georgia in the state of Florida when it comes to recruiting for the 2020 class. Who is Braun as a player? What does he bring to the table? We know he's a very successful student. This is a guy that's going to succeed likely in lots of walks of life. But as a player, our buddy Mike Johnson, the former SEC All-American, likes a lot about Braun as well. Let's dig a little deeper on that as we investigate Braun with Mike Johnson as a part of Real Talk here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger.
All right, guys, Real Talk here with Mike Johnson. And we had a pre-show chat, and I started telling him about Joshua Braun and his grades, his ACTs, his master's degrees. But I think where I got old school Mike Johnson is when I started telling him about tennis and playing doubles and swing dancing. Now, we're going to evaluate a tennis player, swing dancer, national merit finalist, 2 brothers played at Georgia Tech for multiple seasons. Mike Johnson, what do you see right out of the gate here when we're talking about Joshua Braun out of Live Oak, Florida?
Usually when we talk about a lot of these high school prospects, I've used the term gripper. Sometimes the term finesse comes out. Sometimes, this guy's a mauler. I think mauler is the best word. I mean, he's just such a big specimen, but you can tell he understands footwork. He understands leverage with his hands. You can be as big as you want to. That right there is nothing but sheer explosion. And I think when you see that size and kind of finesse combination, it gets you so excited about what that kid can possibly bring to your team. But I don't see any other word to use here other than mauler. This guy absolutely lines up next to anybody. He's going to make any D lineman look small next to that big old frame. And these poor guys in this film, I mean, there's no chance. This guy's going to absolutely maul you to death. He's going to get his hands on you. He's going to move you out of the way. And I'll use a term here for some of you science guys, inertia. This guy's got inertia in his favor, and every time he gets to moving forward, there's not a lot of people that are going to stop him in his path.
So there you go. You get Mike Johnson talking about a kid with a 4.0 and start using those big lineman words like inertia. His dad, Mike, is an offensive line coach. Can you really pick up Coach's kid from this film, from the first 5 clips?
Absolutely, because I think it's easy for a guy that's that big. Oh, goodness gracious. It's easy for a guy that big to get into high school and say, oh, I can dominate and I don't have to worry about technique. I don't have to worry about some of the different things. But watch his ability to, first of all, accelerate his feet, but keep a good base. You know, I harp all the time with some of the kids that I coach, get your second step on the ground. If both of your feet are on the ground, it allows you to react to the movement of the defense. If one of your feet are off the ground, guess what? You can't really, move left to right. You can't really react. You can tell right now he focuses on getting his second step on the ground and really keeping a good base, and it allows him to be that mauler. It allows him to continue moving at the defensive people, and they can't just kind of matador out of the way and kind of wash him by. I mean, you can see him getting up in the 3rd level right here. This poor kid did not want any of that.
So the thing we like about Braun is he checks every box, because we've just talking about his mauling ability. I think he needs a pair of purple pants with that green jersey. He can look like the Incredible Hulk. But here's what I also see. You watch him work, and you watch all the things he can do, but yet his older brothers both played 3 years, started 3 years at Georgia Tech. Combine that with his dad being a high school offensive line coach. Mike, can you imagine any other kid coming in with a better width of knowledge to play offensive line than this young man will?
It's going to be huge, and that's really that combined with the fact that so many of these kids nowadays are showing up early with early enrollments. You didn't have that 10 years ago. This is the kind of guy that can line up right away and make a difference on a football team. And a lot of Georgia fans look at it and say, well, this is a kid that, we're really loaded up front. We've got, 5-star guys across the board. But watch this guy go to work and watch him get in a college weight room and get college nutrition the way they have at Georgia, and watch how this kid blossoms. All of a sudden, B+ foot speed might go to A- foot speed, and that might go to A foot speed, and then you find yourself really a generational talent among offensive linemen. And with the weight and size he has, he's going to be able to run over a lot of people, even in SEC play.
All right, guys, so if you guys were playing Real Talk Bingo, we checked off swing dancer, tennis, coach's kid, gripper, and inertia. That's a first here for Real Talk. That's Mike Johnson. He knows all about this stuff. I'm Jeff Sintel. We just get him talking. Hope you enjoyed our Real Talk on Joshua Braun.
The Georgia offensive line class for 2020 is going to end up looking a little different than we might assume. For instance, a guy like Andrew Rame, who we once thought might be in it's not going to be in it. A guy like Chad Lindbergh, who at one point in time I'd probably assume was going elsewhere, apparently is going to be a part of this 2020 class. The point is, when you look at Braun there, what Mike Johnson had to say about him, when you reflect back on Tate Ratledge and some of the other names that are in this group right now, it really does stack up with, if not the best offensive line recruitment of all time. It's hard to find all that many classes who've potentially put together what Georgia could put together, especially if a guy like Cedric Von Prawn eventually lands in the fold here.
Especially with 2 scholar athletes like Joshua Braun and then Chad Lindbergh. You got 2 guys that basically look like prototype NFL tackles in Tate Ratledge, and you've got Broderick Jones as well. And then is Cedric Von Prawn the missing piece? I think we'll find out in short order, potentially through the rest of this class and the rest of this cycle. But, the thing that I think folks really need to lean in on and understand is I think folks, they look at the starting 5 and they feel great about them. They hear these NFL whispers with a lot of these names. But here's the reality. I can count 7 or 8 guys that are in the Georgia 2 deep right now that will probably be playing NFL football by the 2021 season. That means this class here is essential, considering Georgia only signed 3 offensive linemen last year, to restocking the shelves of elite talent for Georgia in the 2021 and 2022 seasons to come.
All right, here's what's still to come here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger today. We'll take a lot of your questions and comments. We'll give away a $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. We'll do Jeff's weekly 6-pack. Have some trivia questions on tap for today. We'll show you an unbelievable feat by a UGA commit that you might not have seen yet. You'll get a chance to check out that video. But for now, speaking of video, when Jeff was out in California around the time that 5-star running back Kendall Milton committed to the Dogs, Jeff had a chance to talk to some of Milton's teammates there at Buchanan High School. And I think you're going to really like this. It's another window into who Milton is as a player and what it's like to play with Milton. For those of you excited about seeing Milton eventually in a UGA uniform, here's what those that play with him in a high school uniform have to say about him right now as a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger today.
All right, we're here. Greetings, everybody. This is Jeff Sintel joining you guys from lovely Clovis, California. We got two guys that know the gentleman named Kendall Milton very well. I'm going to talk with Mr. Merritt first. If you were writing a story about Kendall, what's the memory that you would like to share with everybody?
Memories, man. Me and Kendall go way back. I met him in first grade. Actually, at first, we didn't even like each other, but then we actually grew to be great friends once we found out we're in the same football team. A great memory that I have with him is second grade. It was our first football season together, and we played for the Buchanan Bears, the Little League team. And, we grew really close that year, and we played all the games together. And I realized how good he was and how much potential he had when it was the last game of the year, championship game. We are up by about 4, I think. We're up by 4. Last play, 2 seconds left on the clock. The other team, they run a sweep play, and I tackle him, but it was a reverse. He hands it off, and the guy just books it down the sideline. And everyone thinks that he's gone and they're going to win because last play of the game, they think he's going to score and he's going to win. And all of a sudden, Kendall comes out of nowhere and pulls him back at the 2-yard line and saves us the game. And we all go crazy. Everyone storms the field, and it was just a fun time. We all put Kendall on our shoulders and stuff. It was just a fun time.
How old was that again?
How old were we?
Yeah.
We were second grade.
What number did he wear? Was he still a big kid back then?
Ooh, I cannot remember. Yeah, he was huge. He was still one of the bigger guys on the field for sure.
Everybody can see the film and see he can play. They know his ratings. What is he like off the field? What kind of teammate is he?
Off the field, and he's probably one of the goofiest dudes I know. Easily funny dude, always enjoyable to be around. He always kind of brings the mood up in the room, always joking around, making people laugh, stuff like that.
What do you think is his favorite thing to do besides playing football and working out and being a Buchanan Bear?
Man, I say his favorite thing to do, it's probably, I know he loves listening to music, he loves to dance, always dancing in the weight room, always showing us new dance moves he got, and it's just a fun time.
Is he a speech guy in the locker room? What does he say before a big game?
Oh, for sure, a speech guy. And definitely the first guy to step up and lead the team. Definitely the first guy to give the motivational speech before a game in the locker room, bring everybody up, especially when we're struggling on the field. He's on the sideline, talking to sub, making sure we get it next time on the field if we're making mistakes.
So last thing for me, everybody's got their own sort of style. He's got Cali style, he says a lot. Mm-hmm. What do you think of his fashion game? You see the reds, you see the outfits. What do you think he brings to the table as like one of those guys that likes to look good off the field? You like the way he dresses? Is that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Kendall's always got style. You know how it is. He's always making sure he's got the fanciest stuff on, making sure he's out there with his Gucci stuff, his Louis Vuitton. He's always trying to flex. So it's cool though. So yeah. All
right, guys. Jeff Sintel. We're here at beautiful Clovis, California, Buchanan High School, the Bears. I'm here with another teammate of Kendall Milton, wide receiver, I think, for the class of 2020. What's your name, sir?
Brandon Hernandez.
Brandon Hernandez. I want you to tell me what Kendall's like on and off the field.
I would say on the field, everybody already knows how he is, but then off the field, everybody thinks that he's probably just some big guy, all serious and stuff, but really he's not. He's just a goofy, stupid teenager that everybody is, and yeah.
Wherever he goes, what do you think the fans, the people there, his future teammates, what are they going to have to get used to about playing with him?
Just how goofy he is, as you can tell over there. But he's just a nice guy overall and just a good teammate. He's always getting the team going, always a team player. He's not selfish at all, and just all around a good player and a good guy.
You got one funny story of him. What's a funny Kendall Milton story? It could be something in practice, something in the locker room, something in third grade. Is there anything that comes to mind about a funny moment for Kendall Milton?
Well, I'll say a funny moment was 7th grade. We had this little guy. He was not even the size of Kendall at all, not even the size of anybody on the team. And then we just told him to go head up against each other, and then Kendall just made the guy's day by just making him get blown up by him. And yeah.
Everybody plays Madden.
Yeah.
And I want you to think of Kendall and his potential Madden ratings. What do you think is his strongest tool, the best thing he does on the football field?
The best, I would say, his elusiveness and how hard he can just get through a hole, and just how strong he is and how powerful he can just break tackles so easily against the DBs and linebackers and everyone.
You've known him for how long?
Since about third or second grade.
What was he like back then?
He's just like how he is right now, just overall good guy, goofy, just nothing much has really changed.
All right, guys. Jeff Sentell here for DogNation.com. Got some more intel on Kendall Milton. Hope you enjoyed it.
So really fun stuff there with some of the teammates of Kendall Milton there at Buchanan High School in Clovis, California. The Bears, as they're known. You see a little clip also of Milton from his commitment video when he announced that UGA pledge. A really fun thing to see. I'm Brandon Adams. We're doing Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. The honest truth is, I have no idea where Jeff Sentell went. He was here and then he's gone. I'm not quite sure where Jeff is, but maybe I hear him now. As he's getting settled in, let me show you something else I wanted to show you today. Good stuff there with the teammates of Milton. How about an impressive showing here as well by Georgia's 2020 kicker commit, Jarrod Zirkle. Have you seen this video of Zirkle booming a... Thank you, Jeff.
I just boomed one.
Booming a 60-yard field goal. Let's take a look at this here. This is one of the reasons why this young man is getting so much attention at the major college level. Got a nice little right-to-left movement there from Zirkle. Pretty impressive. That's a big leg. Georgia's obviously looking to replace its kicker with Rodrigo Blankenship moving on at the end of the season. Of course, kicking camps showing this video off, and Zirkle seems to have what it takes to potentially be a big-time kicker at the SEC level, does he not?
So I like this story. I know some people have their own affinity. Mileage will vary on kickers, but look at this young man right here. Got that flowing mane of Trevor Lawrence hair.
He does.
The YouTube audio on this has fellow kickers saying that he was using steroids and that's why he's going to Georgia.
Jokingly, of course.
Of course, jokingly. But
let's be very clear
that's
about that.
just basically...
Some people are very literal, Jeff.
If you understand 17, 18-year-old kids, that's a sign. That young man right there already is a big fan and a big friend of Rodrigo Hot Rod Blankenship. Here's what I think might happen. He might eventually ask Hot Rod when he gets to Georgia if he could wear that jersey, if he could wear the 95.
Well, I thought you were going to say that Hot Rod was going to ceremoniously give him the specs, and all of a sudden he was going to take over the Hot Rod specs.
Well,
that
would be intriguing.
Kind of, a lot of these teams have their special number that everybody gets to wear. What if the Georgia kicker for time immemorial in the future had to wear the rec specs? That'd be fantastic.
Or what about wear the 95 of Rodrigo Blankenship? The other thing to think about there's Antler Stadium. That was a Kroger six-pack.
That was. Speaking of that, let's get ready to do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and warn y'all, my computer has gone dead. I'm telling you, I'm having problems with this laptop. I apologize. We'll get your comments in. Jeff's going to help me out with that. And I have no way of keeping time. I know we're going long, so we'll see if we can rock and roll with this thing. So Jeff, the floor is yours. Question number one. You got your tie on today. That means you're serious. Jeff's even wearing the French collar. Look at that with the cufflinks. You're talking about fancy. That is fancy.
That was a show week, man. You got to represent, man.
I guess so. All right, the floor is yours. Question number one, Kroger six-pack.
Okay, so first of all, we need to preface this with a little bit.
Oh, this is fun.
These are all about Brandon Adams.
Yeah.
Because this is Brandon Adams week on Dog Nation. Maybe we've beaten this horse to death. We got one more six-pack trivia. So these are questions. Now, the last couple are going to be interactive, where Brandon's actually going to give us his answer.
All right.
But a lot of these is, as to the best of my knowledge, these are the answers. So question number one, which wild prediction did Brandon make on his very first podcast back on August 31st, 2015?
Now, I can tell you that the information is slightly wrong here.
Slightly wrong. Well, first of all,
at least my memory of it's slightly wrong.
Number one, Nick Chubb would win the Heisman Trophy.
All right.
B, Georgia would make the college football playoffs in Kirby Smart year one.
All right.
I think I know where you're going with this. C, Grayson Lambert would be an all-SEC quarterback. Or D, Jim Chaney would be seen as a better OC than Mike Bobo by the time his work in Athens was done. Now let me clarify option B. Georgia would make the college football playoffs in 2015.
Which would have been Rick's final year. Now,
Rick's
at the
final
time,
year.
I didn't know that was Rick's final year, but I'll give y'all a second to guess. If you were a longtime listener of the Dog Nation Daily, and back then that's all you could do, we had no video, that is the prediction I did make, that Georgia in 2015 would make the college football playoff, which in retrospect seems ridiculous. I swear it wasn't as ridiculous at the time, but at least it didn't seem as ridiculous to me as at the time. But that is the prediction that I made. The first episode out of the box, Georgia would make the college football playoff in 2015. They were 9-3 and finished unranked. I missed it by that much.
Missed it by that much.
Missed it by that much.
And so it wasn't that one where you made the prediction about Cheney and being better OC than Bobo?
Well, at that time, Jim Cheney was, who even knows what he was doing?
He was coaching at another
Pitt?
school. He was coaching
Yeah,
at Pitt.
yeah.
Number 2. So that Brandon kind of gave you that one. That was just interesting. I just
That was
wanted
a free
to
one.
get that information out to you guys that Brandon, very first podcast, came out swinging, shot his shot, predicted Georgia
That's right.
in the dance.
I did do that and probably regret that.
Have you made any other wild one zingers since? Do you have an annual prediction anymore?
Kind of. I mean, as I tell my audience all the time, because I have predicted Georgia make the playoff and been wrong, I try to be very careful about just coming on the show and saying, and Georgia's going to win the national championship, because there is a segment of the audience that would say, well, what else is the guy who wears a Georgia shirt on the camera going to say every day other than that? So it's part of the reason, thanks for bringing this up, when we're doing our Own the East video series, because that to me is the evidence and the talking points that really validate why this year is different and better, at least in terms of the preseason prognosis, than it's been in the past for Georgia.
So Chris Branham says BA came in with a scalding hot take and never cooled off.
Yeah, it's been hot takes ever since. Just one right after the other.
Man,
Throwing stuff against the wall and just seeing what'll stick.
That was pretty hot. Number 2, let's
All
keep
right.
moving here.
Let's do it.
Which one of these things has he not made fun of his weekly co-host about?
This is our buddy Jeff Santel here.
A, hair gel.
Yep.
B, vegetables on pizza.
Yep.
C, pancakes
Yep.
at Waffle House. D, wearing ties far too often. Or E, having far too simple taste in post-game restaurants.
So I'll tell you a few backstories in these answers. And if you don't mind, let's leave the choices up there for a second, because I want to tell you a few stories. So one time, Jeff showed up at a Georgia game, and in his pocket he had a can of hair gel, but it was like kind of a thin cylinder. It looked like a can of like chaw or something like that. I thought Jeff had some Skull Bandit with him or something like that. Come to find out it was hair gel. So it was a very different thing than I thought it was going to be. Yes, Jeff, and this was early days of Dog Nation. This was pre-video too. Eating a lot of vegetables on his pizza. Jeff's a lot healthier than you might think. A lot of vegetables in those pizza. C and E kind of go together in the fact that Jeff and I have very different tastes in post-game restaurants. Especially we're on the road in Columbia, South Carolina, or Auburn, Alabama. This is not to give a free plug. I want to go to a 24-hour joint that's famous for selling coffee and hash browns and stuff like that. And I want to get fueled up and get on the road. Jeff wants to go sample some of the local cuisine at 10:30 at night. We still got a 4-hour drive ahead of us. And so we have very different
When in Rome.
very different taste in post-game restaurants. And then, of course, you can see for yourself, Jeff with a tie there. So the answer to this one's actually E. Jeff does not have far too simple taste in post-game restaurants. I would say he has, when it comes to late night, I'm tired, I want to go home, I would say Jeff has elaborate tastes in post-game restaurants. The answer here is E.
Yeah, that's correct. I hope
All right.
all you guys nailed that. It would actually be the opposite there, a little bougie. And then, funny little moment there. I forgot about the bandit story. I'm sure a lot of people have said, Scotty Kirkpatrick's giving a shout out to our
Kroger commercial. We should do one of those again. Scotty, reach out to our folks and tell them we want to do another Kroger commercial. I don't know that it was good, but it was fun. So maybe we'll do that again.
Got Brandon's wrestling magazines fixed in there.
We did do that.
And it's funny, maybe in human history, there's not a lot of times in the South where a hair gel pomade product has been misassociated with Skull.
Yeah. But when you have one of those little cylinder things that looks kind of like that, it's what it looked like.
Dapper
All right.
Dan.
So far, all the questions have been about me, and thankfully, I know the answers. So I'm 2 for 2 this one.
Number 3, moving right along. Which experience provided Brandon with his best moment so far at DogNation.com? A, Georgia taking a commanding 35-0 lead in the third quarter to send the Florida fans home crying in Jacksonville.
That was a good one.
Placing Eddie the Blind Squirrel on the field for a postgame show, celebrating another win against Florida, 2018.
That was a good one.
C, the overtime win against Oklahoma at the Rose Bowl, 2018.
Never to be forgotten.
D, George Pickens flipping to UGA on National Signing Day, 2019. And cue the chortle. E, Adams reading the top targets for UGA's summer cookout, 2019.
Ooh, wow. Are you kidding me off the top here? So I think most of our audience is going to say they like the E better just because they like making fun of the way my mouth sounds when I make all those noises. What will I choose for myself, though? You got to say Rose Bowl, I guess. However, a much closer second than you might think is the 35-0 lead in 2017, because that was the first year of what we used to do back then, was the Gator Hater Countdown. We counted down from 2016 to the next game in 2017, and we did that for a full year leading up to the game. That was the moment so here's our Gator Hater updater now, where we count up how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. But 2017 was the moment when, y'all kind of joke about this from time to time, where we collectively, those of us who are Gator haters, willed that to change. The 2017 moment was pretty special. We did the post-game show that night from the right in front of the Hart Bridge. Beautiful scene, beautiful view. That was a good time.
That was a nice view. Beautiful sunset behind.
Oh, fantastic.
We had a police escort to get down there.
Fantastic. Great times.
And it was a 21-0 lead in the first quarter, too, and it was already, Brandon was feeling kind of saucy that night.
I was feeling very saucy. But Oklahoma, the Rose Bowl, that's got to be your answer.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
See,
oh, wow.
it was a joyous BA day.
Yeah, it really was. And for those of you who were there, you know how much fun that was. And that was good times. It was good times.
See, in my independent reporting in writing that story about Brandon this week, I had that verified from several sources that your favorite moment was actually
I think it probably was.
Number
2017 was close, though.
Number 4.
Gator.
Which experience provided Brandon with his lowest moment so far during his time at DogNation.com?
Yeah.
A, Tennessee's Hail Mary 34-31 win in 2016. B, 2nd and 26 against Alabama in 2018.
Tough to relive any of these.
C, Jalen Hurts leading the Tide again in 2018. Or D, a certain QB transfer in January of 2019. I think I know the 4th place finisher, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, listen, people may be surprised about this, but the one that hurt me the most was the Hurts thing, and last year more so than 2nd 26 or anything else. I mean, to have to come on that field and do that show again, and you see the again in parentheses there, that was my worst moment. I think for a lot of the folks who've been around here, the 2018 SEC championship loss hurt worse than the 2017 national championship game loss, which was actually played January of 2018. But you know the point I'm making here. The game to Bama a year ago was worse than the one the year prior.
So, folks, let me paint the picture here. That was the first time when we were about to go on the air before that, it literally looked like Brandon had been gut punched by Randy Macho Man Savage and Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Not good. It was not good.
Big John.
Now, I didn't look great in that post-game show after Alabama in the 2017 year, but I looked probably worse last year.
I looked at Brandon
December.
before we went on the air, and I looked at him and I said, you know what? If this was ever Brandon as a wartime correspondent, this is what he would look like.
Yeah, probably so. Now, there's a funny moment from the 2017, at least it seems funny now. Somebody walked in front of our camera and I gave that person the death stare. That's kind of a funny thing, but it only seems funnier now.
Oh, nice guy, Brandon. I don't believe that. The pages of history will not record that.
Yeah, unfortunately so. All right, these are fun.
Now you know the highs and the lows. Let's move on to the next one of our Pick Six right now.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of people chiming in, having fun. Everybody is, A was a tough one. Easton delivered a beautiful pass to put us ahead. Matt Talley was talking about the Tennessee Hail Mary.
Yeah, 2016 was not fun either, yeah.
2 50-yard plays within the final 10 seconds of the game.
Because that's before the season really came off the rails for Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to go back and think about the 2016 game. Now, they had gotten blitzed by Ole Miss already, but the season had not just come off the rails yet.
Yeah. And that would dovetail into Vanderbilt Tech losses. That was a bad year.
Yeah.
So I thought after that game and then that's recruiting season, Georgia lost 5 games that year. I thought to myself, might be a long time before Georgia loses 5 regular season games again. And it's proven to be the case there so far because 2 of the 5 losses since have been in postseason. Moving along, number 4, and these last 2, number 5 and 6, Brandon, you're going to have to give us the answer here. I didn't predict an answer because some of these are so hard. So you're kind of off work this week. You're not going to get an official batting average this week for your 1,000 show week.
Well, let's see then.
So everybody else has got to see him. Which player recruit has Brandon talked about the most during his time at DogNation.com? And I have my answer, and I will play along with the home audience as well. A, Jake Fromm, B, Jaden Hazelwood, C, Trayvon Walker, D, Tyson Campbell, or E, Zamir White. I have my answer. I've got a pretty good read when you think about all sources and things that I know who it's going to be.
So unfortunately, the answer here is probably the one that got away. It's probably Jaden Hazelwood. And the thing you got to understand is, it's not that I believe that Hazelwood's the greatest player of all time or anything close to that. I just think that recruitment was symbolic of what I thought was Georgia's need to just upgrade its passing game just a little bit. Not dramatically change the offense, but just be a little bit more dynamic when it comes to the throwing game. And Hazelwood, I thought, would give Georgia that opportunity. Now, Georgia responded well by getting George Pickens in what would have been Hazelwood's place. But unfortunately, Hazelwood may be the answer here. Another name you could have put on there was Demetrius Robertson. Between the transfer before last season and the recruitment that extended beyond signing day in 2016, another name that would have fit on here would have been D-Rob. Longtime listeners know that D-Rob has been talked about for a minute or two on this program.
Yeah, a lot of people are echoing you with Hazelwood. Some
Yeah.
people have said Campbell. We've got a lot of
We talked a lot of Campbell.
You know what's funny?
Less Zamir than you might think, because once Zamir committed, he was rock solid. And we probably didn't fixate over Zamir White the way we fixated over some players. And Fromm in 2017 would have been the same way.
Well, but my answer was different. I chose A because I think you've been talking about
you mean
Fromm.
as a player too?
It says
Yeah.
player recruit.
Okay.
And you talked about Jake when he was on his way with
Yeah.
Christmas videos, and he's going to
Yeah.
challenge Eason and the competition, and then he takes the job, and then Fromm versus Fields, and then this year, I think he's been one of your top 5 talking points.
Oh, yeah.
Every year you've been covering the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, if you did kind of a name check of one of those like word cloud things, I mean, the Fromm name has been pretty big as a part of Dog Nation Daily. I'd probably allow that.
My vote
Not
was
the most talked about among the recruits, but certainly talked about in terms of the entirety of the show. Fromm's very much up there.
You'd say if the question was merely which player have you talked about more than any other, you would probably have to say Jake Fromm.
I think you'd have to. Yeah, I think you'd have to.
I don't know who'd be 2. I think Hazelwood would be 2, maybe Campbell 3, White 4. But you've talked a lot about White just in comeback stuff since and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 6, and we actually we got a special present for Brandon on this one.
Oh my
we're
gosh.
having a pick 7 this week
Oh my
because there's a
gosh.
bonus question. So you're not done. You get
I feel so honored.
Number 6, let's go to one more on this one of our Pick 6 challenge. We all know the Gators are the team he most likes to see the Bulldogs
doubt.
beat, no doubt. But which team comes after that?
That's a good question. I have to go Auburn. I have to go Auburn B. Now, you're going to include Alabama. I'm going to take that one just because of the value of an Alabama win. But if you want to keep this to just rivals for a moment, and I think of the more traditional rivals as of late, Auburn, Tech, and Tennessee, I'll take the Auburn one next on that list. But obviously, Clemson and Alabama are the most valuable. And I grew up in the 80s, as a child of the 80s, when I was a true child. The Georgia-Clemson game at that time was arguably the biggest game Georgia played every single year. So I'm old enough to have grown up in a time when Georgia-Clemson was a legit rivalry. Now it is more of a nemesis along the way to a national championship. So the Clemson-Bama wins would be the most valuable. But from a rivalry standpoint, if you want to compare this to Florida, the next team on that list is definitely Auburn.
We've got people, Elite GB says A and C. Dennis Wilson says, we've been talking about Hazelwood since that man's 8th grade game. Crystal Christie registers in B. All About the Waves on YouTube, giving YouTube some love, says, I hate Auburn more than Florida to keep it real. Lots of B's.
I've told you this before. I don't spend 5 minutes of my life thinking about Georgia Tech. That was true when Paul Johnson was the coach there. That was true when the guy they have now is the coach there. I don't think about them at all. I'm certainly happy to see Georgia get that win, but Tech would have to do a whole lot more than it has done as of late for me to put them in the same category of rivalry for UGA. It's just not the same thing.
Tapper Dan says he hates Auburn more than anything in the universe. And I guess you have the platform of Richard LeCount, the white chalk erase board, where he says this is not a rivalry when it refers to Georgia Tech.
No doubt.
I think my answer, if I had to pick you on that one, I probably would have said Bama, because that's hopeful, Brandon, wanting to see them beat the most.
The value of the win is definitely that. But if you want to catalog this as the rivals, the team that Georgia definitely plays every single year, you would certainly say Auburn is above Tech and Tennessee on that list.
Yeah, that brings me to one point on our coverage right now. You can see a story from our buddy Mike Griffith on the new 2020 schedule has been released. Auburn moves to October. That's very interesting. But also, you see Georgia going to play the Virginia game, the opener, the Chick-fil-A game, and the Benz, and that's going to be on a Monday. very rare Monday night regular season game for Georgia Bulldogs history.
Yeah, we are so late here, so I promise I'm going to be very quick on this. My first glance is I don't like what the Auburn change has done to the Georgia schedule. That stretch where you go Florida, at Tennessee, at South Carolina. No, Tennessee will be a home game. Florida, Tennessee, at South Carolina, at Kentucky, in about a 4-week stretch right there. Schedule makers certainly did Georgia no favor on that. I'm going to look at it a little bit more, and I'll sort of form my opinions on this. But I don't like the schedule. Don't like the schedule.
You also have both Tennessee and Auburn before Florida in that season as well, which is topsy-turvy to say the least. Brandon, we got to do more bonus questions.
Wow, how about
everybody's got to
this?
do more. And this is going to be a tough one here. Which one of these would Brandon most like to see happen during the 2019 season? Georgia hanging 70 on Florida this year at the cocktail party.
I would take it.
The Bulldogs signing a record 11 prospects with a 5-star rating for 2020.
That would not be bad.
C, defeating Clemson in the playoffs this year. Or D, taking down Alabama in the championship game.
Tough choices, like picking between your children, of course.
Naturally, I didn't include anything involving a natty, as Kendall Milton likes to say,
Yeah.
national championship, because that would be the obvious. But which one of those would strike the biggest chord with you, sir?
I'm hoping fans agree with me on this. If those are the 4 choices, now taking down Clemson would be a blast, but Georgia's got unfinished business with Alabama. Georgia has got unfinished business. As much fun as it would be to knock off Clemson in the playoff, and maybe that happened either way, it's the unfinished business with Alabama. Now the Georgia players will say the right thing on this. They're focused on the process more so than the individual opponent. I totally get that. But for me, and I've even picked LSU to win the SEC West. So based on my prediction, Georgia won't face Alabama in the SEC championship game. But if they do, hard to imagine anything's going to feel much sweeter than finally getting over the hump versus the Crimson Tide.
The one thing that was a little curveball among those 4 was that if you get Clemson in the playoffs and beat them, that usually would either foretell an appearance in the national championship game or the national championship itself. But then you could also say if Georgia signs 11 prospects with a 5-star rating for 2020, that might make all those possibilities happen for 3 or 4 more years to come.
I mean, knowing the committee, Georgia beats Clemson in the playoff, they'll just have to face Alabama in the national championship game because Alabama's got a free pass into the tournament. So I want to see Georgia be the one that ends Alabama's season, and I believe the SEC championship game would be the one that would do that.
There you go, sir. My final 1K gift to you is your own, very own.
Yeah,
Pick
boy.
Six pack.
And Jeff and the rest of the whole Dog Nation team been incredibly nice for us. We did celebrate a bit of a milestone here this week, but that's enough about talking about me. Let's talk about what Georgia fans want to talk about. Can we put 5 minutes on the clock? Now, I feel very, very weird here in that my computer's not up and running. The show's like 6 hours long, but Jeff has got the floor for the comments. So y'all blame Jeff if he doesn't get to yours. But Jeff, what do you say we dive in and kind of get some of these comments rocking and rolling here?
Yeah, let's do this. We've got a bunch of questions that we populated from the forum already.
So if you're asking, does that mean I get to answer them? It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I guess so. And I'll either defer or agree.
Let's do Casey's.
Casey has who's the most needed 2021 recruit?
So I'll say it's kind of funny on that. There was a tweet earlier today from Caleb Williams, a 2021 quarterback, who may be the most needed of the recruits. John Anthony mentioned that in our comment section a little earlier. Then we've got the Caleb Williams tweet. Can we show this? Where I think some people, I'll admit myself included, when Williams tweets about the end of August being kind of a big date for him, some of us took that to mean there was some sort of announcement coming. Yeah, he says August 30 is going to be a special day. That's the 2021 quarterback Williams, who's probably the most important recruit on the board for Georgia in that class, or potentially anybody. But apparently, Jeff, you don't think he's referencing any kind of announcement on August 30th.
I think that's probably going to be his first game. They play actually St. Thomas Aquinas, a really good, strong program. That's where Marcus Rosen plays.
Good game.
That's going to be up there in D.C. I think that's what it's referencing. Russman has a good one. Brandon, if B.A. was going to change up his breakfast routine, bacon, egg, and cheese not happening today, what would you have? Oh my gosh, that would be Armageddon, wouldn't it?
It would be Armageddon, but prior to the years of eating the bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, which I've read about, I used to eat a sausage biscuit. I do like the sausage biscuit every now and then. There's a certain chicken-themed fast food restaurant that has a very good sausage biscuit, a very good fast food breakfast.
Did you see the tweet this week from Georgia Sports Information with Holly Rowe and Maria Taylor?
I did see that, yeah.
They busted up a Kit Kat and put it on their sausage biscuit from Chick-fil-A.
I didn't see that. That's gross. But and by the way, that's not the fast food restaurant I was referencing with the good breakfast. Although theirs is good too.
Another question is, got some good ones today. With the assumption that Georgia is now at 83 scholarship players, this is from Fuzzy Dog. What is the most likely scenario going forward with regards to 2020 numbers in the 85 count? A, grant a deserving preferred walk-on a scholarship. That's a one-year rental on a scholarship.
No.
Reclassify Cager and Wolf to 2019, thus eliminating their draw against 2020, or something different.
I don't want to give a preferred walk on a scholarship. I mean, no offense, but
it's just one for the season. That's all it would be. It's not very
oh
doable.
yeah, no, that's fine. I will admit this is the one thing I have no knowledge of whatsoever, because I thought a couple of years ago there was a hard cap that you could never sign more than 25, but Georgia for the class of 2018 signed 26. So when it comes to what you can do year to year, if you told me Georgia could sign 23, 24, 25 for this upcoming class, I honestly have no idea. Do you know the exact number right now?
What do you mean? One more time.
What Georgia can sign this class? I couldn't tell you if it's 23, 24, 25. I'm assuming it's higher than 23 now.
Joseph means 24 because you get a +1 after you have the 2 scholarships charged to 2020.
So you thought it was only 23 before that?
I thought the number was 23. Of course, Kirby Smart and the staff is going to do whatever they can to bust up that with back counting to the 2019 class. How about this?
YouTube sounds good.
Sam Watson, we got to give time to all parties here. Sam Watson says, does Zamir White's performance this season affect Zach Evans' recruitment?
That's a good question, Jeff. My assumption is it probably wouldn't, because, I mean, one of the schools that Evans is also considering is LSU, and they've got some big-time freshman running backs. The A&M situation could be a little bit different. They're more in flux, their running back situation. I'm assuming it probably doesn't, that it's the in-state poll that's more of a threat for Evans than what Zamir White might do, but that's certainly a fair consideration. What do you think about that?
I mean, everywhere he's going, there are going to be dudes there, guys that can play, can run the rock. With White, though, my opinion here is if he has a big gargantuan season, 1,200, 1,400 yards, something like that, that just secures the fact that he's going to be 3 and done, compared to there's going to be at least 3 seasons of eligibility, 2 more seasons of eligibility at a place like LSU.
Yeah, exactly, because you're talking about 3 years and done. I mean, Jeff's counting the first year out of high school in 2018 on that. The only thing from the current team that I think would impact Zachary Evans or maybe even Kendall Milton is if for some reason DeAndre Swift decided he liked college so much he wanted to stay. That's the thing I think would get them reconsidering their situation.
If DeAndre Swift pulled Nick and Sony, that would be interesting.
And that's no disrespect to Swift, who I wish could play at Georgia for the next 10 years. But that's the kind of thing that would get a 2020 recruit thinking about something different.
Yeah, and then Georgia probably wouldn't need to in that scenario as well.
You better say hello to those Facebook people. They're going to be very upset.
Last one. Hello, Facebook people. Let me just hop on back over to Facebook. I'm going to grant you.
See, this comment thing's not as easy as I make it look, is it?
Well,
it's not as easy as I made it look for 1,000 shows.
I've got 3 barrels here, sir. I've got 3 barrels. Chadwick Ivory wants to know, is Otis Reach pushing LeCount for playing time? I think he is, but I think Richard's done a good job with that.
Yeah, I think that Richard LeCount is now, with Georgia fans, among the most underrated players on this team. I think so much was made of some of the missed tackles that LeCount had in high-profile spots, and I get why that conversation took place. I do. I think it's now been overstated, though, that LeCount is actually, I believe, very high on potential draft boards, ready to leave this season as a junior, and I don't get any indication from the Georgia coaches whatsoever they've considered making kind of move with LeCount, whether it be for Otis Reese or even for Lewis Seen, who's a freshman who I do think is going to play a good bit. I think that Georgia's coaching staff views LeCount as among their solid starters. They won't say that publicly, but I believe LeCount has a solid spot at Georgia because I actually think he's better than some of the narrative among fans would suggest.
Leading tackler last year, Joel Moody will close with his question and make sure Facebook has its appropriate dollop of love. Joel Moody wants to know the leading tackler this year, ? Rice, ?
He may be the best. He may be the best tackler on this team. I don't know if that's good enough to be the leading tackler or not, but he may be the best tackler on this team. So it's as good an answer as any for me.
Leading tackler, I would probably think Richie has a really great shot at that. So would a guy like
probably don't want that to be true though, right?
Well, you would want the leading tackler to come out of your inside linebacker spot in Georgia to identify an alpha, whether it is hearing some things about Quay Walker.
How many
making
tackles
a
did Monty
push.
Rice have in that G-Day that time? Didn't he have like 20
Yeah,
tackles?
I mean, I think Quay Walker's making a push. You hear some up and down things
Yeah,
there.
the Walker thing is a little bit interesting.
You hear some up and down things there with Channing Tindall. I'm telling you guys, Nakobe Dean. It may not be week 1, week 2, week 3, but by the time the big ball games happen, that late stretch of November, I think the leading tackler in every game could very well be Nakobe Dean.
But that's something that even Roquan Smith did not do. I mean, it's important to point out. You may end up being right when it comes to leading Georgia in tackles for a game. Among the leading tacklers for a season, that was not Roquan Smith as a freshman in 2015.
Yeah, but you're comparing talents now, Brandon. I've done the homework and talked to the necessary people. Technically speaking, read, react, attack the ball. Nakobe is in a better position coming out of high school than Roquan was. And the other thing I'll think about
I just want people to understand how rarefied it would be if Nakobe does perform in that up to that standard.
And then you also got to remember Jordan Davis. Everybody's saying best shape of his life. Roquan Smith did not have a Jordan Davis in front of him his first couple of years in Athens either.
All right, so we got to go. Huge thanks to everybody for making Before the Hedges presented by Kroger possible. Jeff, thank you for making my week's worth of 1,000 shows really, really fun.
Who gets the 50, sir? You got to decide.
I'm telling you, we'll let you figure that out, and Jeff will reach out to him and let you know after the show. So y'all look for communication from Jeff Santel on that. Y'all, I'll see you tomorrow morning as part of Dog Nation Daily. We'll do that at 10 a.m. Jeff has got some really fun stuff coming up to the side over the course of the next couple days, so make sure you check that out at dognation.com. Keep up with everything going on at UJ practice as well. Don't let me interrupt your drinking here.
Sparkling water, sir.
We'll also see you next week right here at this time for Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Y'all have a great day.